You are creating an impossible situation and just asking for a reason to be upset. This summer has been a whirlwind of crazy news articles. And today I came across another one that I just can't resist commenting on. That article is a headline on the CBC titled, "I shouldn't have to look non-binary for my identity to be respected." And that is cringy enough. But the tagline further reads, "I like my feminine name and wearing the occasional dress, but that doesn't define me." And finally, the image caption. Julia Wright, 19, says almost every person they meet assumes they're a woman because of their appearance. So I've gone ahead and read the article so that you don't have to, but basically the long and short of it is that this individual named Julia chooses to present as a woman, but gets very upset and debilitated when people notice the fact that they present as a woman. Directly in the article, Julia tells us that there's lots of things that they like that are feminine, but there's also some things feminine that they're not too fond of. And do you know what that sounds like to me? Most of us. Don't we all, to a certain extent, find elements of gender stereotypes that don't fit us too well? See, this whole thing strikes me as rather peculiar. If you're biologically female, utilize a female name, and dress as a woman, 99% of people are going to assume that you are one. Which, by the way, you are, but that's really not my point here. Now, the author insists that this is disrespectful, but I think this is just how humans interact with other humans. It would be like walking around a golf course carrying golf clubs and becoming enraged every time anybody makes the assumption that you know anything about golf. See, this whole matter gets down to the very core of what being non-binary is. And that is something well worth discussing because at its core, being non-binary is a political statement. And I say that because it's a public attempt to change people's conceptualization around there being two genders that are coupled with two biological sexes. Now, I am deliberately refraining from passing any judgment on whether it's appropriate to be non-binary. You may be able to guess my opinions on this, but that really is not my purpose here. But what I do want to highlight is that being non-binary has nothing to do with being gender dysphoric. They are not the same, and we should not be treating them like they're similar. So here's the thing. I am biologically male. We all already know this. And I live in a world, as do we all, that puts a whole bunch of expectations, assumptions, and restrictions around my gender. For me, my instinctive responses and inclinations and behaviors aligned much more closely with that of biological women than biological men. Why? Who knows? But it's been that way for a very long time, and after 30 years, it certainly does not seem like it's going to be changing. And transition for binary individuals such as myself is not so much about running away from being male as it is about modeling and embracing what resonates with me. And when I say modeling, I truly do mean that because my presentation is just as much for other people as it is for myself. I accept that we live in a world of binary biological sex, and I'm not looking to change that for anybody. But we also need to remember that our society also places a bunch of baggage around being male and female that really has nothing to do with our biology. And instead, that has to do with our conceptualization of masculinity and femininity. So for myself, I use visual clues to indicate that I align much more closely with that of biological females than I do of biological males. That's where my interests lie, and that's just simply how I socialize. And I do that so that people know what I'm looking for, they kind of know how I fit into society, and if they're willing, they understand what I'm looking for in terms of how they treat me. But does that change the definition of woman? Does that mean that biological sex doesn't exist? If anything, I would argue that it reinforces the binary by demonstrating that by changing the way that I present, I can demonstrate to an entire population that I align as something that I'm not. If the binary didn't exist, that wouldn't be possible. Now, as regular viewers of my videos will know, I don't share my pronouns with anyone ever. I simply go by Julia, I present exactly the way that I do here, and I go about my life. I don't share my pronouns because I don't believe in compelled speech, but I also don't share my pronouns because I don't need to. Everybody knows what I'm going for because I've given them a very clear model with how I present. But do you know what you're doing when you have very specific expectations for the pronouns that someone uses for you and yet give them no visual indicators to know what it is? You are creating an impossible situation and just asking for a reason to be upset. You are creating a trap that people will inevitably fall within. It's like a police officer who hides behind a wall or a bridge or something and then pops out to give a speeding ticket to anybody who goes too fast. See, speed traps are great if your objective is to catch people who are messing up. But if your real objective is to reduce speed, then there is something very wrong with that model. If that's the case, then we have to address why cars are going so fast to begin with. Maybe we need to change the design of the roadway, or maybe we need to have better speed enforcement signs so people remember what the speed limit is. Maybe we need to add speed bumps. Or maybe on a given stretch of roadway, the speed should be higher. Drivers can inherently sense this by the design, and so they end up going faster, giving you the perfect opportunity as the police officer to catch them and get a quick ticket. And that, in a nutshell, is other Julia in this article. Doing nothing and giving people no hints that they want anything other than their biology, and then claiming that it is devastating the moment that they get given the pronoun she. This is not taking ownership of one's own situation. This is offloading that responsibility onto everybody else. I actually did a whole other video talking about the dangers of looking for your affirmation through pronouns, and I will link to that video in the comments. But my point here is that other Julia is the kind of person who makes things very hard for transitioned individuals such as myself. And this is because when people advocate that we need to always ask people their pronouns every single time, it leaves people the impression that transgender individuals such as myself are looking to dismantle their gender paradigm. I'm going to do a follow-up video where I will get into non-binary identities in further depth, but right now I'm about to lose my sunlight, so I'm going to call it quits for the evening. Actually, quick thought before I go. You notice that in this piece, I referred to the author as they/them throughout the entirety of the video. I don't buy into the idea of non-binary identities, but I do buy into the idea of respecting people and calling them what they want to be called anyways. For me, I'm willing to do that out of basic respect, although I understand that for some people they're not willing to make that gesture. I did a video a few months ago where I talked about that element of pronouns in greater detail, and I'll link to that video as well. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, this is my childhood elementary school.